cookies, it's like the best cookie place. It's the best like baked like place, the best bakery, you know. And I want to introduce you. You're the owner. What is your title here? Because it looks like you're the face, the owner, the baker, the
yes. That everything.
And do I call you Aunt Kelly? What do I call you? I didn't get you.
Aunt Kelly.
All right, this is Aunt Kelly, folks.
Hi.
Cats and kittens, boys and girls. So I'm doing this podcast here where I'm talking with different people who are artists in some way, shape, or form. And I think like food is a type of art, especially
definitely
here in Baltimore. Like, you know, you want to go there, you're like, hey, I want a slice of pie. It's like, I want to go to this place. I want some cookies, I want to go to this place. It's like, I like variety. I like those options. So I look at what you do here as a form of art. So can you tell us a little bit about the story of like how you got involved and why baking in Baltimore?
Okay, so it all originated, I'm a Baltimorean, so of course I love butter crunch cookies. You know, we grew up in the school system eating the butter crunch cookies, chocolate milk, lunchtime. Okay.
Yes.
Fast forward to, let's say, 20 years ago. I was searching for that butter crunch taste that I remember from back in the early 80s, and I just wasn't getting it. So I spoke with my grandmother. She was an excellent baker. She gave me a couple of recipes, fiddled around with it, got our signature butter crunch cookies. So I didn't do anything with it. I sat on it for a little over 20 years, just giving it out to my family, friends, customers, because I was in a whole nother field.
Yes.
Until I started teaching at a cosmetology school. I would give them to my students, and next thing you know, they're like, Miss Kelly, you need to sell these. Miss Kelly, I'll buy them. And then I was like, you know what? Yeah, you can buy them. And then there it is. It was born right there.
Got to supply that demand.
Definitely.
So you mentioned like butter crunch being a main thing, and it was just that one brand. It was that one brand, and like you can tell the difference, I think, between like something that's mass produced and a brand, whereas what you have here, it literally there is art that goes into it. It's like you can taste quality butter, you can taste quality ingredients, and it's just like, all right, this was baked. It's not some cookie cutter thing,
right?
Because I came down yesterday and I got probably a dozen. That's like my standing order now. It's like I go there, get a dozen a week, then do extra minutes in the bike because they're the good, it's the good stuff. The sugar, it's the butter, it's the good stuff. For someone that's in Baltimore who wants to be involved in maybe opening up a business or doing something that's creative that may involve food or may involve art, what advice would you give them?
First thing you're gonna have to do, give it away.
Okay.
That is the advice that I heard, and it holds true. You have to give it away. You give it away, get people's take on it, how they like it, what you need to improve on. Do you got a wow factor product? You learn all of that first by giving it away.
Okay. It's like a focus group, you know. You got to spend money to make money, and I think like people get confused with it. Like what I do, I podcast, and it's a free thing. I just throw it out there, and you have these like conversations with people who are business owners and who are just mentors in that way. And they say, "Oh, you got to make money from it." And it's like, no, how do people know what it is first? So I definitely agree with that notion.
I hear you on that. You can be money focused. You have to be product and quality focused, and then the money will follow. But when it happens, when you start chasing the money, the product suffers, and then you have no more money because you're closed down.
Yes. So you touched on earlier the butter crunch. It kind of reminded me of this quote. I think it was from Toni Morrison. It's just like, if there's not something that's written that you want to read, you should write it.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, I'm not seeing what I want. I'm gonna make my own.
Exactly.
That's a really good approach. So what would you say maybe your biggest win has been, like, since you've been in this space? How long have you been in this space?
I've been here for 9 months now. Okay. So we haven't made our year mark yet.
Coming up soon.
Yeah, the biggest win, I would say everyone who comes through the door is a win, you know, that hasn't heard of me before, but someone shared a cookie or word of mouth, or I kept seeing this on Instagram, and they actually come in. That's a humongous win. because you never know how people will take to the food that you offer.
Yes.
Everyone's taste buds is different, you know. I find myself to be a foodie. I don't eat from a lot of people, places, you know, so I'm particular.
I don't eat everybody's potato salad, you know, that kind of thing.
Oh, no, mac and cheese, potato salad, no, but yeah, I'm just so overjoyed. That's the word I'm going to use, and I'm going to stick by. I'm overjoyed by the response that I'm getting from everyone. I love it.
It's great. We're going to wrap up in just a few more questions that I wanted to ask. As far as like picking out like flavors, right? Like one of the places that I like a lot is Donut Location. We talked about, I think, previously. And
yes.
He's a mad person when it comes to flavors. I actually pitched him some flavors. What goes into you coming up with your flavors and what you're gonna have to put out there? Like, is it, hey, I got 10 like different flavor types I want to try, and I might trim that down to 6, or how does that work as far as your process and coming up with what your cooking menu would be?
Well, I'm old school.
Okay.
And like I said, I grew up with my grandmother. I was under her hip in the kitchen, you know, licking the spatula from all the batters. Yes, grandma's child. I like to stick to the traditional.
Okay.
You know, they're the classics, the favorites.
Yes.
That's what I stick to. Now, I might veer off a little bit, but as far as giving a whole bunch of quantity, that's not my focus. Quality. So just a handful of cookies. We'll interchange some of them during the seasons, you know, like Fridays. I say it's peanut butter Fridays. We'll offer peanut butter cookies on Fridays.
That sounds great.
You know, something like that. We'll do more of that.
Okay.
You know, interchange a couple of cookies on a certain day a week.
Okay.
But I never wanted to be the 51 flavors of cookies because I think the quality will go down.
I guess last question. As far as what do you have that's coming up? Are you into the festival atmosphere? Are you into like just what would be your goals over like maybe the next year or two that you would say, okay, I'm moving in the right direction?
My number one goal would be to open up another location.
Okay.
That's what I'm focusing on for 2020.
Absolutely.
2020. I hear it all the time. I wish you were on the east side.
That's the
I wish you
2020
were.
vision.
That's the 2020 vision, and that's what I'm putting everything into. We gotta have another location.
That's great. This has been Rob Lee from MTRthenetwork.com. I'm here with Aunt Kelly. I'm gonna get probably it doesn't need to go. And this was There's Truth in This Art. And until next time, it's been real.
Thank you for having me and thinking of me. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So welcome. I'm Rob Lee from MTRthenetwork.com, and this is a interview I'll be having with Kris from Sophomore.
Yep.
So introduce yourself, Sophomore. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the whole thing. Sophomore Coffee is it's my place. It's the place I go to every day.
It's my place too. Sophomore Coffee is a dream that eventually turned into a reality, and it's very real every day. This is probably the most realist thing I've done my whole entire life. But you know, my background's in coffee. I've worked in the coffee industry for at least the past 14 years or so. Like most people in the coffee industry, I kind of stumbled into it as just kind of a job to have on the side while I was in school, and I have this pretty distinctive memories of childhood, and kind of some of my most distinctive memories of childhood are hanging out with my dad on the weekends and getting coffee with him. And both he and I were the only people in our family that drink coffee, and I have an older brother and a mom, of course. And you know, when you're the youngest brother out of two brothers, you're always trying to vibe for attention from your parents.
Yeah.
Particularly your dad, you know, especially when you're growing up. And I remember that would just being our thing. Like, we always got coffee, and that was our thing. And my coffee is mostly like, you know, cream and sugar and a little bit of, you know, a splash of coffee, but I really fell in love with the routine of it and kind of the process of putting things together, the process of kind of like tweaking it to your flavor profile. And it kind of started off with that. And then as I was in school, I was just like, you know, like, let me get another job. I was really intimidated by working at Starbucks. It seemed like very, very busy. And I was like, I don't want a job that's busy. I want like a laid back, like easy job. I really wanted to be social. And I think growing up, I didn't really have the capacity to be social in the way that I always wanted to be.
Sure.
And so finding a job that kind of pushed me to be more social was probably not the forefront of my mindset. I was probably more so interested in meeting girls or something like that. But and also kind of like just learning more about this thing that I was really interested in. So I got a job at this spot down in Annapolis. I pretty much grew up in between DC and Baltimore. My dad was in the military, so we moved around a bit early on in my life.
Sure.
But we got stationed in Maryland, which is pretty close to where my parents grew up in New Jersey. And we have family in Philly. We have family down in North Carolina also too. So Maryland was kind of a central spot. So yeah, I got the job in Annapolis, and kind of fast forwarding through the early part of my career, because a lot of it was just kind of taking any job that would allow me to basically work and do coffee, and really taking any kind of job, any opportunity when it came down to it. But eventually I moved into Baltimore. I think it was like my senior year of college, and pretty much stayed here up until 2012. But throughout that time period while working in coffee, I opened up my first shop, which kind of goes into the sophomore story. But the first shop was, it still exists. It's called Charmington's over on Howard 26. And that was a collective of me and like 8 other people that kind of came together to open that up. And in that process, especially now after opening up sophomore, I realized how little involved I was. I was like, I don't remember doing any of this stuff at all. That was a little more set up for me.
Here.
Yeah, essentially I didn't do anything really. I just made coffee. In that place I really focused just on the coffee. I was kind of the coffee guy. And it was cool to kind of go through the process of getting something set up from nothing essentially, and kind of seeing aspects of it. But it kind of left me with the taste in my mouth of kind of like, all right, I'd like to do more. I'd like to have more control, more kind of more of my opinion kind of going into the business decisions and that kind of thing. When you're working with 8+ other people, it's really hard to kind of have your voice kind of stand out in that way. So I moved on from that opportunity, kept doing other stuff, and then landed at the Four Seasons down in Baltimore when it first opens. And I helped open up a concept called La Mille. Okay. And La Mille was based in Los Angeles. And I only really note that because that was kind of the turning point in my career where I started taking it seriously. I mean, I had a job at the Four Seasons. I was making a salary. I had been out of school for probably a couple years at that point. And I graduated in 2008, where the economy just tanked, and pretty much everyone was either going right back into school or just working the job they were doing while they were in school at the same time. And so for me, it was really important because it was the first time I ever had like a legitimate job. Sure. And all throughout going through college, I was always the promise after getting out of school, you have this job, you have this job. Yeah. And I got out of college and I lost my job essentially, which I thought was, almost recession proof, and realized that it is not.
I was in a similar thing. I think I graduated a year before that.
Yeah.
And I go, oh yeah, chase the dream, man. White picket fence.
Yep.
And I did that, and I think within like 2 years, I was like, I'm burnt out. I need to do something creative. I need to switch gears here. Yeah. And then thinking like, I'm always going to have this job.
Yeah.
Hey, we're doing a reduction in force. Shit.
Yeah.
I'm out of here, guys.
You're like, that's nothing to do with me, right? Like, oh, that does do with me? I'm on that list? Got it.
Actually, you're the only person going. I was like, damn.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
At least for us, it was like the whole entire place. It was like half the staff was let go. And then it was a thing where it was like, this didn't really save the company. This gave us like another month. Like the rest of us are losing our jobs in the next month. But through that process is how Charmington's came together. It was like that group of people that were all working together. When that place goes down, we all took all the equipment and moved farther north into the city, into a more neighborhood spot. And it's still doing great. It's been there for 10 years now, which is pretty wild to say. Shining moment in my opinion is the fact that Obama visited there back in, I wasn't there unfortunately when it happened. I'm really bummed out by that, but I think it was like 2010 or 2011 when he stopped in there and like signed with the chairs and everything. So I still have that underneath my cap to be happy about. But so the limo experience for me was really important because it kind of legitimized, what I had been doing kind of casually for a while. Yeah. It gave me a nice salary, and it kind of put me, put me in this corporate, world, which I hadn't really ever been in. And that was pretty jaunting in many different ways, without really getting too far into that. But that opportunity opened up going to LA. So it's kind of done with that. I was talking to people in LA, and I was just like, hey, just so you guys know, I'm out of here. This whole thing is crazy. And they were just like, if you want to, we can open up a position for you out here in LA through, with La Mille still. Come on out. And I was like, sure, of course you're going to do that. Like, I'm this random kid in Baltimore. You're not going to do that at all. And they called my bluff, and they reached out with an offer. I pretty much didn't have a reason to say no, so I decided to move out there completely on a whim. All my family's here on the East Coast. I knew a handful of people in LA. I'd been there maybe once before for a couple days, so it was really kind of it was really a leap of faith, but it was really kind of based on the fact that at that point I wanted to keep doing what I was doing. Sure. And I was just like, all right, like I'm able to do it in this kind of way and be legitimate in this kind of scenario. Let's keep pushing it further and further and further, see how it goes. So did 2 years in LA. That was amazing. I traveled around the country, around the world. Definitely took a deep dive into the industry. Definitely took a deep dive into the really heights of the coffee industry, for that matter. Just in terms of how serious I was taking it at that time. Really enjoyed my experience, but also really missed home. So I didn't think I could come right back to Baltimore, so I decided to sidestep it over to New York, which was another kind of leap of faith and kind of random decision, kind of based on just the fact that I had friends out there, based on the fact that it felt like, closer to home and closer to the East Coast. I had family in New Jersey, like 30 minutes outside of the city too, so it just felt like the right move. And that was also crazy and intense, but through that experience, I realized what I really wanted to do, which was actually working back in the coffee shop. In LA and in New York, I was doing training and education. So I was talking to people that worked as baristas and how to make coffee better. I was talking to normal people off the street, how to make coffee better in classes. And I was going to setting up accounts. I was opening up coffee programs, doing all this experience that ended up going right into sophomore. So I've opened up probably about 20 plus different coffee programs at this point now. And I've been hands-on with at least 5 to 10 of them, I would say, without really thinking about it. And all that experience was just, really pivotal going into this. And it still didn't really get me exactly where I needed to be to do all of it. Still, a lot of it's still firsthand, but it gave me a huge head start to kind of get a lot of the vision of the company down, a lot of the style of the coffee that we make down there down, also the systems and all the things that allow us to make coffee good consistently down too. And all that stuff is really important. It's not as important or flashy as some of the other things, like the way the place looks or the way that you look or the way the place feels and all that kind of stuff. But it takes care of the main thing, which is coffee. So when I got back here to Baltimore, I wanted to take a break. I was just ready to take a break after New York. New York really wiped me out. But it was a cool experience. So definitely will hold on to that. Lasted about a year and a half there, which is for me was enough time. People that can last longer than that, I'm really impressed by. But I was ready to come back home. But I decided to take a break from coffee. I'd just been doing it for so long that I didn't know if I was just doing it, if it was something I actually wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to do something in the coffee shop, and I knew I didn't want to do it for somebody else anymore. I knew that it was time to kind of step out on my own, but I also knew that I'm not just going to step right into that. I need to get my foundation set back in the city and everything like that too. So I started working with my friend Lane Harlan, who owns WC Harlan, which is a really awesome cocktail bar kind of tucked away in the neighborhood. And then up a block away from that is Cobell, which is an amazing Mexican restaurant. So it's a taqueria and a mezcaleria. And I was just I can wait on tables. I can do this. It's pretty easy. And all I had known going into it was that the restaurant was busy. People were saying really great things about it, but I'd never been. So my first day there was the first day in the restaurant in general. And I was just really amazed. It was everything that I learned in the fine dining industry when I was out in LA, working with different restaurants and fine dining on that end. But it was the comfort level of Baltimore. So it was really great food, really attentive service, but a really comfortable atmosphere. And that felt to me exactly what I wanted to have inside of a coffee shop. And I felt like you're always kind of compromising. If you had really good coffee or really good, kind of skills, it was always really stuffy and kind of pretentious. Or if it was laid back and really easy, it was always just no one really cared about what you were doing at all. So I wanted something where I could take the best of both worlds in my mind. And I worked there for 2 years. Lane found a property that we're on right now. And she was wanting to open up a beer garden and a wine bar, found this amazing property for it, and realized there was a space on the other side of the courtyard that was just kind of just sitting there. And she hit me up and was just I literally had no idea she was even doing this. And when she asked to talk to me, I thought we were talking about something work-related. And she was just you should be running your own spot. You shouldn't be working for me. We have this spot. We're not going to use it in the daytime. It's a perfect space for a coffee shop. And we checked it out, and I'm going to breeze through a lot of the build-out process, so that was pretty painful to an extent, but it took us 2 years. It took us 2 years probably from the first time we set foot on the property to opening up the doors. And, conceptually, Sophomore started probably, 5 years ago in my mind. But in terms of what it is right now today, a lot of that has happened in the past year. Definitely in the past 6 months we've been open now. But yeah, it's really fortunate. We try to keep things very simple. We try to present things in a very simple, straightforward way. We try to take a lot of focus on coffee and also on service. Yeah. And those are kind of the two pillars of our business, is that people feel really good walking into the space. They get something they feel good about, and they leave the space feeling great also too. And as simple as that sounds, it's involved, throughout the whole entire day. It's pretty active in terms of the style of service that we give, and also in terms of the way we brew our coffee. But our goal is to try to do that as simply as possible and make it something that's fun for people to come to and enjoy. Or whatever you're trying to get out of it. If you're trying to get in, get out, get a coffee, we can do that. If you're trying to come in and nerd out with us about coffee, we can do that. So really try to make the experience tailored to whoever comes into the door.
It's It's a dope location. Like, as I said before, I am a sophomore head. I'm recording that right now.
Yes. Hashtag sophomore heads. Yes.
It's every weekend. It's a weekend thing every time. Like,
Love it.
It became part of like what we do because usually, me and my girl we're over there at our place. We're hanging out. We're gonna walk the dog. We're gonna do the whole thing. That's now a part of the routine. It's not. Are we getting coffee? Like, are we getting sophomore? That's what it is for us.
Yeah.
And one of the pluses for me. Because I do one of these podcasts on Officially Black, and it's like, oh, black people don't do this, black people don't do that. It's like, well, that dude looks like me.
Yeah,
because of the glasses.
Glasses and beard. Just because of the glasses. Yep.
Just because of the glasses and beard. So I was like, I don't give a shit. I'm supporting what happens here.
And I appreciate that. I think that's super important to me. I think growing up, I grew up in the suburbs. I think that there was not a lot of representation. Growing up on social. I don't say social media. That wasn't a thing when we were growing up. There was no social media. I'm just straight up media. I mean, the only representation I had growing up was Steve Urkel, which I'm sure you had too with glasses.
Yeah.
And it's just like, cool, this is all we get, Steve Urkel. That's it. So that's all I get is Steve Urkel. All right.
Can I be Stefan?
No, never even close to Stefan. And now, I look at, a lot of kids and the way that they dress and the way that, the representation that, just throughout movies and TV shows and music for that matter too. And it's such more of a range. And I feel like that's something that always happens to, our communities that we tend to get pigeonholed as like, you can only be this thing right here. And everything outside of that means you're trying to be something else or trying to be, somebody else, whatever else might be. But at the end of the day, I walk down the street and, I look a certain way and that's just the way it goes. But, for me, I think that what's really important about it for me is that I do think that there is some merit to that. I mean, we live in a city that is predominantly black. Yep. And a lot of people that come through the doors, it's interesting when you work in a space and you're in a city that's predominantly black, but then like your clientele isn't that. Yep. It's not representative of the city itself. And you start thinking about, well, I'm like right in the middle of the city. I see black people around me at all times, people of color at all times. And what about this space makes them not feel like it's okay for them to come into it? So there's not much we can do about that. We're not going to be out on the street pulling people off the corner and like dragging them in there, but I think
get your coffee.
Come on in, it's okay, I promise. So we don't do much in that regard, but I think we do a lot in terms of when people come into the door, making them feel immediately comfortable, coming down onto their level, and not to make things seem stupid or trying to talk down to people in any kind of way. And I think that's what happens a lot in coffee shops is that as you're trying to explain something which is inherently complicated, you start to use terminology that seems to be above someone's vernacular, and you start to basically talk down to them as you're trying to explain something. And I think it happens to the best people that have the best intentions, but I think that being aware of that and aware of where someone's at, taking context clues as, someone walks in or looking around and they seem comfortable immediately, you should kick into the gear to make them feel as comfortable as possible. And I think that seeing a person that looks like you on the other side of the counter makes you feel comfortable automatically, So that's super important to me, but that's just something that I am, So for me, it's less of the forefront of our mind opening up the shop, and more so just that's who I am, bringing myself into this experience and showing people that there's many facets to, being a black person in America, or also just, it's hilarious to me because, the people who touch the coffee first are all people that are black and brown. Yep. So it's just, and then at some point, it kind of strays away from that. But it's a huge conversation in the coffee industry and always has been in terms of on the production level and also on the consumer level too. Yep. And I don't think it's something that's going to change, overnight. But at the same time, I think that the more and more we see it, the more visibility that happens and the more comfortable people get with it. I think that the easier it'll be to have those conversations and also to maybe eventually not even have the conversation at all. Maybe it's just something that is normal, when it comes down to it. So, but we get a lot of people inside of the shop from all different diversities and backgrounds, and that's something that I'm personally really happy about, is that the room kind of shifts and changes throughout the day pretty quickly. Kind of having a small space allows the room to fill up very quickly and to empty out very quickly too. It was
that sense of, I go to a lot of different coffee shops, and some more pretentious than others.
Sure.
And I just remember coming here one day, and I think it was like maybe one of the first times I've come over here, and my girlfriend was just like, I want them to be very successful, but I don't want assholes in there. It was that. It was just like, but it's not that. There's no assholes in there.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I run into, like being a person that loves coffee, and I have a taste for certain things. Like I know what's crap and what's not.
Totally.
And like this morning, I was introduced to a crap. I was like, yeah, I got some coffee. This was like, this is garbage. And it's like, I appreciate the notion.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, you drink this, right? It's like, just because it's hot and black doesn't mean I like it. It's like, yo.
It's crazy though. I mean, there's such a range, and that's what's been interesting for me, just as someone that's worked in coffee for 14 years. It's like, I've seen people what I consider to be the most vulnerable time of the day in the morning before they've had coffee, and it's every range. You have people that could not care less. Like you said, it's hot, it's black.
Dunk it, please.
Yeah, let it rip. Let's go for it. And there's people that are like very particular about it too, and not even to the extent of like, I need to have the most like expensive coffee in the world. It's particular in terms of like what exactly they want. I mean, I'm infinitely impressed by walking into a Starbucks and hearing someone say, okay, I want this size, this many pumps, that much caffeine, this and that. Yeah, and they like engineered like, this drink that's specifically tailored towards them. And that's something I think is really, amongst other things, really unique and really special about Starbucks. And I know it's not a typical thing you think someone in my field is going to say, but they've done a lot for our industry. They set the standard. They created the clientele that we would deal with every single day now, and they made it something that people think about. They're not just consuming it; they're thinking about what they're consuming. And I think that that's an overall change across the board in the culinary field, but particularly for coffee, it's still like it could go either way. I think that's the same with food in general, though. Me personally, like I love to eat, I love food, I love drinking. I don't want to consume anything that isn't great, but sometimes I do, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm that person that will probably go out of my way to get something that tastes really good, But
I'm the same way. Like it's a quality thing where it's just like, is this good? I don't care about the price.
No.
And generally speaking, when I run into like something, I'll get like coffee. Or I'll get maybe a pizza that's just like, get this $30 pizza. It's like, nah, pizza doesn't cost that much. It's like, well, the one that I'm having does. Would you like a slice, or would you like some of this coffee, or whatever the case is? I know what I like.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm gonna have to taste this, and I hate because I still have coffee in the house right now. It's I think it was like some espresso or something.
Okay.
And it's like,
it's just not it.
I don't want to pitch this. This is not good. I don't want to pitch this, and I don't want to sully a freaking better bean.
Yeah.
And before we wrap up, because I don't want to hold you too much longer, because you're a busy coffee guy.
Coffee's not gonna make itself.
So just two last questions. You kind of touched on it before, but why Baltimore? Why open up a shop in Baltimore? We're horrible here. We're scary.
It's there's a lot of rats. I mean, just coming into the room, we had to cross about 10 trains of rats coming down the street.
Yes.
For me, Baltimore is my favorite place that I've ever lived, and I haven't lived everywhere, but I've lived at enough places to have at least a general opinion about it. But I think for me, Baltimore represents a lot of things that are really important to me. As much as I can be frustrated with city life at sometimes, I think living in the city is a really important experience. I think being close to people is really important. I think having an understanding of where different people and how they live is really important too. And I think you get that in the city. You get people that are living well above your means, and you have people living well below your means, and they're kind of all interacting in a way. And I think that Baltimore always represented a city that had that experience, but also felt comfortable to me. I remember going into DC because I grew up between the two, and never feeling comfortable there. And I remember the first time coming to Baltimore and feeling immediately comfortable after some of the shock wore off a little bit. But yeah, and I think I felt like this was a place where I kind of came up. I didn't grow up in the city per se, but I do feel like I grew up in the city. I got here when I was like 21 or so. And, you're still growing up. You're still growing up between, I'm still growing up now, but, very much so between, 20 and 30. And that's like a pivotal, time period, particularly when you're figuring out who you are as an individual outside of your family unit. And I think I always had, a soft spot for the city because of that. When I left Baltimore, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I wanted to learn. And I knew that, unfortunately, at that time period, I wasn't going to be able to learn what I wanted to learn in the city. Yeah. But I always left with the intention of coming back. And, family's here. I have such a network of people and friends here that are in my corner. And particularly after going through the experience to open up a business. Yeah. Even before that, but even after now going through it, I can't imagine doing it without having the network of people around me to support me. And we opened up our doors to a lot of support. And a lot of that was just through the location of where we did it, and also a lot of that was just through a lot of the work that I'd done up until that point, just in this one place. And so for me, it was really important to come back here. I mean, I think that when I was leaving New York, my boss there was like, "Why don't you do it here in New York?" I was like, "No one's going to care if I do it here in New York." And that's the thing; people really care about things you do here in Baltimore, and people really appreciate people that establish themselves here in the city also too, and businesses that decide to stay here. and just tried to create jobs for people and try to make the place a little bit better for the people in their communities. And I just felt like this was a city where I can make a difference. And at the same time, this is a city where I can feel anonymous if I want to, And you can kind of get both aspects of that in the city. And I haven't really felt that in any other place I've been to. And so it was really important for me to come back here to do that.
I dig that. And lastly, last question. This is the ball buster question.
Oh, here we go.
So, actually, not really. If someone wanted to get involved, because I think you kind of touched on something that I run into all the time, like, man, you drink that jet fuel, you drink this. It's just like, I think it's at least in the conversation I have.
Yeah.
Specifically with people that kind of look like me, there's a fair amount of, I don't know what this is, ergo I'm not going to learn about
Totally.
it. What would you say like would be an entry point for someone like to just kind of get a little bit more coffee literacy?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's that thing that you touched on earlier about like some people may feel like, oh, well, this is complicated. This is not for me.
Yeah.
Or, what's that entry point? Because Keurig is not that for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I think a lot of it is, if you are really curious about something, I feel like now we live in a time period where information is there if you want it. If you really want to learn about something, like, it's there for you, So obviously the internet is a huge tool and resource that can be a black pit and a black hole. But at the same time, if you have some kind of direction, it can put you in the right place. I really think that going to your local spot is always a place to go to, and finding a spot that feels good too. And I think that was something I picked up in New York, where it was like, there's this coffee spot that's great, and then 2 doors down another coffee spot that's great, and around the corner another coffee spot that's great. It's like, what's drawing people to these different places? And I think that living there is what kind of tapped me into things like vibe and energy, and like what you put out there into a space. And I feel like if you find a place where you feel comfortable, that allows you to explore and to let your guard down a little bit. So I think going to a space where you feel comfortable and then letting your guard down a little bit and allowing yourself to kind of explore what's happening there too. But in terms of just like drinking coffee at home, I mean, for me, it's like I've been getting really into. This seems kind of weird because it's a little not intuitive. It's a little bit different than what you would expect from a coffee person. But instant coffee is kind of becoming not a new thing because it's very old, but another aspect of the specialty coffee industry now is instant coffee, and basically taking really good coffee, brewing it well, and extracting it well into this format that can become very, very simple. Literally opening up the packet, dumping it into water, stirring it up, and you're done. So I think that's really, really great in terms of making things really accessible to people, giving people access to really good coffee, and also in a very easy format. Because when you start going down the route of like pour overs and French presses and all sort of kind of stuff, people are kind of like glazed over. Like, I'm not doing that.
I have a mocha pot and a French press.
That's pretty impressive. Most people don't even go down that route at all. I mean, I think Keurig really revolutionized things for people at home, because I think even drip coffee. You put 10 people in a room with your coffee pot, I bet like half of them don't know how to even use it, So I feel like the Keurig really helped people out at home a lot. And honestly, with the Keurig too, that's great. I mean, I think that the ease of use and the consistency factor of Keurigs and espresso is amazing. And the really cool thing is that the patents for a lot of those pods is up now. So a lot of people are actually getting into that market and putting good coffee into that, and then trying to, bring people along the way that way too. So I don't knock anything. I think that whatever you use at home, whatever you feel comfortable with, is all good. And there's good ways of making coffee in that method. Sure. Even for a Keurig, if you use, filter water versus, tap water, that's going to change the difference in the flavor. I mean, coffee's mostly water. So if you use better water, it's going to taste better. And that's a really simple thing you can do. Yeah. Cleaning your stuff. I mean, come on. Like, clean your stuff.
my Mr. Coffee was not clean. I was like, what's this? What are these chips in here? Ew.
That's what I mean. Like, clean your stuff. Yeah. Things will taste better if you clean it. You clean your dishes. Take care of your things. Yeah. So really simple things. But I'm with whatever anybody wants to do. And for me, my perspective now, particularly after working in the industry for a while, it's all about getting people to whatever it is that you like. Let's get you there. Yeah. So I think finding people that are in a place that you feel comfortable with to explore. Making the best version of whatever you have around you, and then also being open to trying new things too. And that's kind of what helped me out a lot, trying something that I didn't really think I was going to like, and then finding something I liked about it, or even just trying something you don't like and knowing that you don't like it. Like, and in that way you're just like, cool, I don't like this at all, I'm done.
Checked off.
Exactly. But I think just having a sense of curiosity helps out a lot. Okay. Absolutely.
That's dope. Socials, address, so people can come over here and listen to this?
Yep. Sophomore Coffee, we're on the corner of Maryland Avenue and 23rd Street. So our physical address is 2223 Maryland Avenue. We're down the stairs. Don't be scared. Come on down. Big blue door. Big old coffee sign on the side too. And we're on the property along with our friends Larder, which is a daytime cafe. They're open for lunch, and they do dinner on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. And Faden Sonnen, which is a beer garden and wine bar. And they are putting out really good products, both those two other companies, and we're really happy to be involved with everybody here. And we're situated in the beautiful, historic Old Goucher neighborhood, which doesn't get a lot of love, but it's been exciting being here and being around, being amongst people, being in a new neighborhood too that hasn't really gotten a lot of press or a lot of shine and or a lot of attention really, and trying to create something for people that live in this neighborhood, and also attracting people from outside of the neighborhood into this neighborhood too, to get an idea of what it's all about. But yeah, that's where you can find me pretty much every day.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Right on, man.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
This has been great. Hope you guys learned something. Some coffee.
I hope so. If not, come on through to the shop. We'll teach you some more.
Just hang out. Just have a swig. Just a swig.
We won't bite you, I promise.
Until next time, this has been Rob Lee for Kris from Sophomore. This is there's truth in this art. Yeah.